In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to copy and paste in almost any situation that you find yourself in FL Studio. So by the time you get done, you're going to feel confident and comfortable to be able to create duplicates of almost anything from plugins to patterns inside of your projects. So let's jump in. All right, so the first instance that I want to cover is if you are in the channel rack and you either need to duplicate a channel that you've already made, or you want to simply copy and paste some of the chords or the notes that you've already made in one instrument into another one. I'll show you how to do that really quickly. So here I have a instrument, FL Keys, and I have loaded up the Rhodes instrument, and I have made a couple of adjustments to this instrument to make it sound a little bit different. And so what I want to do is actually duplicate this track or clone this track so that I can have a copy of it, because maybe I want to play a different set of chords, or maybe I want to alter the sound of this a little bit. So what I can do is I can come in here, right click on it and say clone, and what you'll see is it's going to bring up a copy of the same instrument with all of the same settings that we had in this first one, and you'll see that they are the same in that other one. And then if I wanted to actually copy and paste the notes from the first track into the second one, I could highlight that green button that's right beside the notes on that first instrument. I press Control C, and then I come down and select the next one, and I press Control V, and I have duplicated those notes. I've copied and I've pasted those same notes from that first instrument into the second instrument. So let's take this inside of the actual piano roll now, and let's say that I have created a chord progression and I want to copy and paste that same chord progression into this next set of bars that I'm working on. So if I hold down Control and then I left click and drag around all of those notes, if I then press Control and B, you'll notice that it duplicates that set of chords and puts it right beside the thing that I just created, or the set of chords that I already had. So that's a way that you can actually just quickly copy and paste a chord progression that you've already created, and you just want to have that same thing flow into the next set of bars. You can have that pretty quickly and easily. But let's say I don't want to copy everything. So let's come back over here, and let's say I just really want to copy just the bass notes, or just something else along those lines. So if I hold down Control and Shift and I select those bass notes, now I have those notes selected, and then I could just hold down Shift, and if I do that and drag it out, I will have the same notes that I just copied, and only the bass notes, and they are copied over to that next section. And I just did that by, again, holding down Shift and then dragging those notes over, so it creates a copy of just the notes that I want to highlight. And I'll also show you another way that you can do this. Let's say you only want to copy part of the last part of the chord progression. So let's say from bar 3 and to bar 5. So bar 3 and 4, I've highlighted both of those notes, and then maybe I don't want all the notes in there, so maybe I want just these bass notes. And then if I press Control B now, it's only going to copy just the notes that I selected, only from that portion, but it's going to paste it right after the chords that I just created. But one thing you need to check and make sure of is up here on the snap, you want to make sure that it's set to line, or you can set it to step or something along those lines, because sometimes if you zoom in here really closely, you'll see that maybe it's off by a little bit. And that can be if you don't have it set up quite right on the line up here where it's line or cell, or if it's none, then it may start shifting things off when you start using that Control B. So just make sure that you're on something that it'll snap to something fairly close by and to the rest of the chords. So then if we jump over here to the playlist, you'll see that we can do something similar to what we were doing in the piano roll. The same kinds of commands will work as they did in the piano roll for the playlist window. So if we highlight these 3 patterns, if we want to duplicate what we have in this first little section, we can highlight it, press Control B, and you'll see that it showed up right beside there. We can also do the same trick where we right click and drag to select around the section that we're working on, and then we could just select the pattern that we want duplicated, press Control B, and it'll only duplicate that one. Or we could come back here and we could just say select these, whoops, We could select these bottom two. Let's start over here. We could select these bottom two by holding down Control and left clicking and dragging around them. And then we could hold down Shift and then we could just pull those aside. But again, make sure if you do this shift trick that you have the line set up or cell or step or something along those lines where it's snapping to something, because if you just drag it with shift and you're on, the snap to grid is on none, then it's pretty easy to get off from it being directly on point. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I go to none and I drag it over to where I think it should be, but then I zoom in, I can see that I'm not directly on that line. And so that might cause me some problems because I thought that I was directly on that line to where it's going to match up with the patterns and match up with the click track, but it'll turn out that it's not going to do that. So just make sure that you select one of these snap to either line or cell or bar, beat, whatever, just to make sure that you get it lined up correctly with what you are working with in there. And one of the things that I noticed on this is if you just select all the things and you press Control C and then Control V, it usually puts it weirdly like one beat ahead of another one rather than sticking it beside the other one. So it doesn't work as well if you try that. So just keep that in mind as well. Like it tends to mess some things up. You see it pulled it a beat over from what the other one was. I'm not sure why it does that, but it just seems to be the way that it defaults to doing that in FL Studio for some reason. So the last thing I want to talk about is actually inside of the mixer here in FL Studio. So let's say that I set up a parametric EQ. Let's change this back to something like this where I had a preset that I wanted, that I liked in here, and I wanted to use this same preset in another channel, like the same plugin and the same settings that I used. I could come over here to this drop down menu and I come down to where it says save preset as. If I drag that little icon, left click and drag it and drop it on the channel that I want, it's going to bring up the same plugin with the same settings into that other channel, which is really helpful if you have, let's say, a whole bunch of vocals and you want to treat them the same way with EQ. It's a quick way to just drop in the same effect across those different channels. The other thing that I can do is if I want to copy everything that's inside of this channel, so I want to make sure that I have the parametric EQ, the limiter plugin or the compressor plugin, and the reverb that I had on this first channel, I could come over here and right click on the channel where the plugins are. I'm going to come down to File, and then I'm going to come here to where it says Save Mixer Track State As. I'm going to look at that icon, left click and drag. I'm going to do the same thing, just drop it on that next channel over, and you'll see that it has duplicated. It's copied every one of those plugins from that first channel over to that second channel. So that's a quick way that you could take all the same plugins and settings that you have on one channel and transfer or copy them over to another channel so that you have a very similar sound or a similar effect, and then you can just go in and tweak what you want from there. I know it can feel intimidating when you're just starting out trying to figure out all the basics of FL Studio and how you can use it to put together your own projects. And if you want some help, I've created a 3-part series of the basics of FL Studio to help walk you through how to get comfortable in the program so that you can create your own songs and be able to get them out into the world quickly. I've included a link in the description below where you can sign up for free. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you can get alerted every time there's a new video, and I will see you in the next round.